"Help! There's a child she's locked up down there, in a cage. You have to come quick." The 911 dispatcher sat up straighter, motioning to the nearest officer. The woman on the line was panicked, her voice breaking with urgency. "It's a little girl. She's not moving much. I think she's hurt." In the quiet town of Greenfield, Georgia, where most emergencies involved stray dogs or neighborly disputes over fences, calls like this were rare and dangerous, especially past midnight, when nothing good ever happened. Sheriff Roy Walker was only 2 sips into his lukewarm instant coffee when the call came over the radio. The address was familiar. County Line and Ashbury, a stretch of road barely lit, lined with modest homes and sagging porches. "Dispatch says it's serious," Deputy Ramirez reported as he climbed into the cruiser with Walker. "Caller's a neighbor. Says she heard something, and then saw a little hand through a basement window." Walker didn't answer. His mind had already begun turning. The house in question belonged to Peter Wilkins, a single man in his early 40s, kept to himself, paid his taxes, mostly unseen. A few folks had said he had a kid now, but no one had really questioned it. Not in Greenfield. As the patrol car rolled to a stop outside the weather-worn home, everything felt too quiet. A broken porch light buzzed above the entrance. Walker's boots crunched the gravel as he approached the door. Ramirez knocked firmly. "Sheriff's Department, open up." No response, but then faint. From inside, a dry, raspy cough. A whimper. They exchanged a look. Walker drew his weapon. "Probable cause," he muttered, and with one firm kick, splintered the old wood of the front door. The house reeked of sweat and sour whiskey. Empty bottles littered the floor like someone had been drinking for days, maybe weeks. Dust floated in the flashlight beams, and then they heard it, a faint scraping sound, like nails against metal. They followed it to a door beneath the staircase. Locked. Ramirez leaned in. "Movement. She's in there." Walker didn't wait. One kick, 2 on the third. The door flew open, revealing narrow steps spiraling into darkness. Flashlights up, they descended. The basement was damp, stale, and unfinished. But in the center of the concrete floor was what stopped them both cold. A cage, heavy metal bars, no bigger than a dog kennel, and inside it, curled into herself, was a little girl. Her skin was dark and thin, her body trembling despite the heat of the night. Her hair was tangled, her lips cracked. She looked barely alive. Walker knelt beside the cage. "Sweetheart, it's okay. We're here now." She flinched. "Hard." Ramirez hissed under his breath. "Jesus." Behind them, footsteps pounded above. "I told you to stay out of my house," a voice bellowed, slurring at the edges. Peter Wilkins stormed down the stairs, shirt half unbuttoned, eyes bloodshot. The smell hit them first, cheap bourbon, thick and clinging to his every breath. "What in the hell are you doing here?" "She's my daughter," he roared. Walker stepped forward, gun still down but eyes sharp. "You adopted her?" Peter swayed. "Damn right I did. Kid's trouble. No one else wanted her. I'm doing what I gotta do to keep her in line." "She's 6, Ramirez snapped. "She bites. She screams all the time. That cage is for her own good." Peter's voice cracked, more defensive than sorry. Walker stared hard. "Step away from the stairs, sir." Peter hesitated, eyes glassy. Then he laughed bitterly and raised his hands. "Y'all don't get it. Not your problem anymore." Ramirez cuffed him roughly, pushing him against the wall. Meanwhile, Walker turned back to the cage. "Anna," he whispered. "That's your name, right?" The girl barely nodded. Her eyes flicked up at the mention of her name, but when she caught a glimpse of Peter, her body went rigid. No, she whispered hoarsely. "Don't let him heal." "You're safe," Walker said, fumbling with the latch. It was rusted. His fingers shook with anger. Finally, it gave. He reached in. She didn't move. He tried again, softer. "Anna, can I carry you?" "Just out of here." "It's okay." Her small body trembled violently as he gently lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder. But when they moved past Peter, Her eyes locked on him, and her face went pale as paper. Walker felt her heart racing against his chest. "It's over," he whispered. "He's not going to hurt you anymore. If you felt something for Anna, give this video a like to show your support. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Who knows, someone near you might be watching too. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter." Outside, the neighbor stood on the lawn, holding her hands over her mouth. Porch lights flicked on, all down the street. A few residents began stepping out, drawn by the lights and sirens. Paramedics pulled in just as Walker carried Anna out. Peter screamed from the back of the cruiser, cursing everyone. But Walker didn't flinch. He handed Anna gently to the EMTs. "She's dehydrated. Check for fractures. Keep it calm." As the ambulance doors shut, Walker stared into the flashing lights. Anna was safe. For now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hospital room was cold, even under the thick layers of blankets. Anna lay motionless, her tiny frame dwarfed by the sterile white sheets. Electrodes dotted her temples and chest, quietly transmitting her vitals to the monitor beside her bed. Her eyes, half-lidded, stared at the ceiling, not quite seeing. Roy Walker stood at the window, arms crossed, staring through the glass at the parking lot below. Rain tapped lightly against the pane, a steady rhythm that mirrored the pounding in his chest. He had seen a lot in his years as sheriff meth busts, family violence, drunk drivers, but never something like this. Never a child locked in a cage like an animal. Not in his town. He turned at the sound of the door creaking open. Nurse Mary Jo walked in quietly. Her face tired but kind. "She's stable," she said softly. "No broken bones, but bruises all over her ribs, back, legs. Looks like some are weeks old. Malnourished, severely dehydrated, skin infections, trauma-related hair loss." Walker took a breath. "Jesus, she hasn't spoken since you brought her in, not to anyone." He stepped closer to the bed, looking at the fragile girl who had barely spoken more than a whisper. Her hands twitched now and then, like she was dreaming of being back in that cage. "Where's Child Services?" he asked. "Should be here within the hour," Mary Jo replied, her tone stiffening. "But between you and me, I've seen them drop the ball before, especially in cases where the guardian has papers and a clean record." "Wilkins won't have a clean record much longer," Walker growled. "He might still walk," she warned. "These kinds of cases, they get lost in the system. Especially when the victim doesn't speak." Walker clenched his jaw. That wasn't going to happen. Not this time. Mary Jo laid a gentle hand on Anna's shoulder and whispered, "You're safe now. Honey, no more cages, no more bad dreams." Anna blinked. A single tear rolled down her cheek. That was the only response. Later that morning, the sunlight began breaking through the clouds, casting a dull glow across the parking lot. A knock at the hospital room door drew Walker's attention. A tall woman in a gray blazer stepped inside, carrying a black binder. Her hair was pulled tight into a bun, and her expression was somewhere between tired and indifferent. "Sheriff Walker?" she asked. "Yes, Moat. Melanie Grant, Georgia Division of Family and Children Services." He gestured toward the girl. "That's Anna, 6 years old, found in a cage. Guardian is Peter Wilkins, who claims legal adoption." Melanie gave a cursory glance toward the bed, then opened her binder. "We've had one report about Wilkins 6 months ago. Anonymous. Not enough evidence at the time to pursue charges." "Let me guess," Walker muttered. "Case closed." She didn't respond. "I want him charged with felony child abuse. Endangerment. Whatever sticks. If the girl doesn't testify, it's not that simple." Melanie replied. Walker took a step forward, lowering his voice. "She was in a cage. That's not a gray area. That's criminal. I understand your passion, Sheriff, but we work with what we can prove in court." Walker felt the words rising in his throat, the fury boiling just beneath the surface, but he held it down. Arguing wouldn't help Anna. He had to be smart. Melanie continued. "For now, she'll be placed in emergency foster care until a full assessment can be made." "I know someone," Walker said immediately. "Mary Jo. The nurse. She's qualified. Her home was approved years ago. I'll consider it. She's the only person that girl has looked at without flinching," he added. Melanie finally paused. Noted. There. An hour later, with hospital discharge papers signed, and Anna wrapped in a soft blue blanket, Mary Jo carried the girl out to her old Ford sedan. Walker walked beside them, his hand resting lightly on the car door. Anna didn't speak. But as she was buckled into the back seat, she looked up at Walker with those wide, haunting eyes. "Are you gonna leave me?" The question came so softly that he almost didn't hear it. He crouched beside the car, locking eyes with her. "No, Anna, I'm not going anywhere." Her lip quivered. She didn't smile. But she nodded. It was the beginning of something. Back at the station, Walker pored over Wilkins' file. It was thin, too thin. Aside from the single anonymous report 6 months prior, there was nothing. No school records, no pediatric visits, no photographs, no background checks on the adoption. It didn't make sense. He called Ramirez in. "I want everything we can dig up on Wilkins. Who placed Anna with him? Who signed off on it? I want neighbors questioned. Any history, even rumors." "Got it," Ramirez nodded. "And get me that neighbor who made the 911 call. I want to talk to her myself." By late afternoon, Walker was back in his cruiser, heading to the house next door to Wilkins. A short, sharp-featured woman named Darlene Mott opened the door, clutching a half-empty coffee cup and looking tired. "You the one who called?" he asked. "Yes, I wasn't sure at first, but I kept hearing things at night. Like banging, crying. I thought it was the television. What changed? Last night I was taking out the trash, and I saw something move near the basement window. It was tiny, like a hand. I thought I imagined it, but then I heard the crying." Walker nodded. "Did you ever see the girl before?" He always kept the blinds shut. Told folks she was shy. Said she had tantrums, trouble making friends. Nobody questioned it. Walker rubbed his temples. Too many people hadn't questioned anything. He climbed back into his cruiser, staring ahead at the Wilkins house, quiet again, empty, a crime scene sealed with yellow tape. But in his gut, Walker knew, this wasn't just about one broken man in a cage. Something darker was hiding under Greenfield's good manners and friendly smiles, and he was going to dig it up, all of it. Mary Jo's house sat on the edge of Greenfield, where the pines thinned out and the fields opened like wide, empty arms. It was a modest 2-bedroom home, painted pale yellow with white shutters and wind chimes that whispered on the porch. Safe. That's what it felt like. Safe and slow. Anna hadn't said a word since the hospital. She sat curled up on Mary Jo's worn couch, wrapped in a quilt too big for her tiny frame. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fireplace, though it wasn't lit. In her lap, a stuffed bear one Mary Jo had pulled from an old donation box sat untouched. Walker sat across the room, watching her. The silence pressed in thick. But he didn't try to break it. He knew what silence meant. Sometimes it was the only defense a child had. "She hasn't eaten much," Mary Jo said quietly from the kitchen doorway. "Just a few crackers and juice." "She's scared," Walker replied. "She's traumatized." Mary Jo crossed her arms, her voice tighter now. "And I'll tell you what I told the social worker, this girl's not a number in a file. If they try to move her again, they'll have to go through me." "Huh." Walker gave a small nod. "They won't. Not while I'm here." Mary Jo sighed and stepped into the room, kneeling beside the couch. "Anna, honey," she said gently, "you're safe now. You can stay here as long as you need. No cages, no yelling, just blankets, warm food, and people who care." Anna blinked slowly. Her hand brushed the bear's ear but didn't grip it. Walker leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Anna, do you remember what happened the night we found you?" The girl didn't answer. "Do you remember what he said to you?" Her breath caught. For a moment, it seemed like she might speak. Her fingers curled tighter around the bear. "He said, 'I was broken,'" she whispered. The words landed like a punch. Walker exchanged a glance with Mary Jo. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "Not even close." Anna's gaze flicked toward him. It was brief, but it was something. Later that evening, Walker drove back into town, mind swirling. He parked in front of the sheriff's station and made his way inside. Ramirez was already there, hunched over a stack of manila folders. "Anything?" Walker asked, shrugging off his coat. Ramirez looked up, eyes tired. "Kind of. Wilkins applied for adoption through a small private agency, Bright Pathways. Out of state, Colorado." Walker frowned. "That's odd. Why would someone in Georgia go through an agency in Colorado?" "Exactly," Ramirez said. "Also, get this, there's no follow-up paperwork, no home visit reports, just a stamped approval. Forged? Could be. Or someone got paid to look the other way." Walker paced, agitation rising. "Did you check with DFCS? They claim they were never notified. No transfer of case files. It's like she just showed up in Wilkins' house. And no one asked questions? Neighbors thought he was doing charity, helping out a kid in need. He told them she had issues, emotional disturbances. People didn't push it. No." Walker stared at the floor. A 6-year-old girl locked in a cage. And the town just nodded along. He turned sharply. "I want the full background on Bright Pathways. Owners, board, financials. See if they've had other shady placements." "Already on it," Ramirez said. Walker hesitated, then added, "Also, get me a list of any past complaints involving Peter Wilkins. Anything, even rumors." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "You think this goes deeper?" "I think we've been asleep at the wheel." Back at Mary Jo's, Anna was finally asleep, her small breath soft and uneven. Mary Jo sat by the window, watching the driveway, her mind racing. She had seen many children pass through her doors during her years as a foster parent, but none like Anna. None so silent. None who refused to eat unless someone else took the first bite. None who flinched when she heard a door creak or footsteps outside. She remembered what the doctors had said at the hospital. This wasn't weeks of abuse. This was months, maybe longer. Her heart broke anew. Suddenly, Anna stirred. A low moan escaped her lips, and she began thrashing beneath the quilt. No, please." Mary Jo rushed to her side. "Anna." "It's okay, sweetie. Wake up, it's just a dream." But Anna wasn't waking. Her eyes were open wide but blank, unfocused. Her arms flailed, hands swiping at invisible bars. Mary Jo gently caught her wrists. "Anna, you're not there anymore. It's over. You're with me." Slowly, Anna stopped. Her chest rose and fell in rapid gasps, but the wild fear in her eyes began to dim. "I dreamed he came back," she whispered. "He won't," Mary Jo said, pulling her close. "He won't ever touch you again." The next morning, Walker stood on the porch of the county courthouse, files in hand, ready to push for an emergency hearing. He needed Wilkins held without bail. He needed someone to listen to understand what kind of man they were dealing with. But the judge was skeptical. "Sheriff," Judge Connolly said, folding his hands, "I understand your concern, but this man has no criminal record, no prior reports that held water, no solid proof that he falsified the adoption. And the girl, well, she hasn't made a formal statement." Walker slammed the file on the desk. "She's 6 years old. She's terrified. She was in a cage, and she's been removed from the situation. That's the good news." "That's not enough," Walker said through clenched teeth. "He walks now, and he'll disappear before trial." The judge sighed. "You want justice. So do I, but I also need due process." Walker left the office fuming, wind tugging at his coat as he descended the courthouse steps. He didn't see justice. Not yet. All he saw was a system too slow, too careful, and far too willing to forget. But he wouldn't let them forget. Not Anna. Not this time. Greenfield had a way of swallowing secrets. It was the kind of town where folks smiled at church and waved on Sundays but kept their eyes low when something felt wrong. The kind of place where silence was safer than standing out. Sheriff Walker had lived with that silence for years, but not anymore. He stood on the cracked pavement of Maple Lane, clipboard in hand, knocking on doors. His badge wasn't just for show today, it was armor. Behind him, Ramirez handled the house across the street, both men working their way through the neighborhood like slow-moving hounds sniffing for a trail. At the third house, an older man in a worn Braves cap opened the door. Hank Morrison. Retired mechanic. Lived next to Peter Wilkins for nearly 8 years. Sheriff, Hank said cautiously, rubbing his hands on his jeans. Didn't expect you here. Morning, Hank, Walker said, keeping his tone even. Got a couple of questions about Peter Wilkins. Hank's eyes darted. Heard about the arrest. Didn't think Peter had it in him. Walker watched him carefully. You ever see a little girl around his place? Well, Hank scratched the back of his neck. He said he took in a foster kid. Said she had trouble adjusting. Emotional problems. Screamed a lot. Did you hear her scream? Once or twice. Figured it was part of the adjustment. Peter always said she was a handful. Never saw any bruises. She wasn't outside much. Walker nodded slowly. Did you ever see her play? Walk around the yard? Go to school? Hank hesitated. Now that you mention it, no. Just figured he homeschooled her. That's a thing now, right? Walker wrote it down, jaw tight. You didn't think it was strange she never left the house? I guess I did, Hank admitted. But folks don't like being accused of things without proof. Did you ever hear anything coming from the basement? Silence. Hank's eyes shifted to the side. Yeah. Sometimes. But I thought it was maybe a dog or something. Never asked. Walker thanked him and moved on. Same story, different doors. He seemed like a good guy. Quiet, but friendly. Said the girl had issues. Never thought to ask questions. It wasn't just apathy, it was complicity. A town choosing comfort over confrontation. By noon, Walker returned to the station, exhausted in mind and soul. Ramirez sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, thanks. Email it to me. He hung up and turned to Walker. Got something. That adoption agency, Bright Pathways, it's under investigation. They've placed kids in at least 4 homes that were later shut down for abuse. Walker dropped into his chair. And no one caught this before? Private agency, minimal oversight. Most of the placements were out of state. They found a loophole targeting counties with overburdened public systems. They pitched themselves as fast-track adoption solutions. Give a child a home today. That kind of garbage. Walker's fingers tapped the desk. So how the hell did Wilkins get Anna? Ramirez grabbed a file and flipped it open. There's a woman listed on the paperwork, Karen Elmhurst. She signed off as Anna's caseworker. But guess what? She doesn't exist, Walker guessed. Exactly. Fake credentials. Address leads to a vacant lot in Denver. This whole agency might be a shell. Oh. Walker stared at the wall. Anna had fallen through cracks carved out by greed and laziness. Someone had sold her into a cage. Get me everything on the agency's founders. Who's profiting off this? Ramirez nodded, already dialing. That evening, Walker made another stop, this time without backup. Mary Jo's porch light was on, casting a warm glow across the yard. He knocked softly. Mary Jo opened the door, eyes tired but alert. She's in the kitchen. Drew a picture today. Walker stepped inside, brushing off the cold. Anna sat at the table, crayons scattered before her. She looked up but didn't smile, just studied him quietly. What are you working on? He asked gently. She pushed the paper toward him. A child's drawing, a house, a big tree, a small stick figure with messy hair standing near a sun. But in the corner, small and scribbled, was a dark box. Bars? That's the cage? He asked. She nodded. He sat beside her, not pushing. You ever draw yourself outside the cage? Anna looked at him for a long time, then shook her head. Walker reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a new box of crayons. Here. Maybe you can draw what you'd like it to look like instead. Just for you. Anna hesitated. Then, slowly, she took the box. Walker leaned back. You know, when I was little, I used to draw spaceships. Said I'd fly away when things got bad. Did you? She asked quietly. Number, but I did learn how to fight what was bad. Mary Jo appeared at the doorway, drying her hands. I've got soup if you're staying. Walker glanced at his watch. Can't tonight. Got a meeting with the DA. Mary Jo's eyes narrowed. They going to press charges? They want more, he said. More statements. More evidence. maybe even testimony. She can't handle that, Mary Jo said firmly. I know, he said, but we may not have a choice. As he stood to leave, Anna called softly, Sheriff? He turned. Do you think I'm bad? His heart broke clean down the middle. No, Anna, he said. You're not bad. You were just hurt by someone who was. And that's not your fault. She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded. Walker stepped out into the dark, the wind colder now. The sky was cloudless. Stars scattered above the rooftops like little truths waiting to be seen. But truth, he knew, meant nothing unless someone chose to speak it. And in Greenfield, that would be the hardest thing of all. Walker returned to the station well past sundown. The building was quiet, just the hum of the old vending machine in the corner and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. He poured himself a coffee, even though it had long gone cold in the pot. He didn't care. Sleep wasn't coming tonight, and he had too many questions still unanswered. He dropped into his chair and opened the case file. A photo of Anna was clipped to the top, taken by the hospital nurse during intake. Her eyes stared back at him, wide and haunted. Her arms were wrapped around her knees, bruises peeking through the hospital gown. He flipped the page. A copy of the adoption papers, stamped and signed by a woman who didn't exist. A list of emergency contacts, all disconnected numbers. Bright Pathways logo printed proudly at the top, complete with their empty slogan. Every child deserves a home. He gritted his teeth. Yeah, and monsters don't deserve custody. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the station door. It was nearly 10 at night. He opened it to find Darlene Mott, the neighbor who had made the 911 call. She looked nervous, clutching a faded sweater and glancing behind her as if someone might be watching. Can I come in, Sheriff? She asked, voice low. Of course. He stepped aside and led her into the small interview room off the lobby. She sat stiffly, hands twisting together in her lap. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. My husband said to keep my head down. But I can't sleep, thinking about that little girl. Walker nodded. You did the right thing calling us. There's more, Darlene said. I didn't say everything the first time. I didn't want to get involved. Not really, but I used to clean houses on the side. Before I hurt my back. And once, last year, Wilkins hired me. Paid in cash. Told me not to touch the basement. Walker's eyes narrowed. Go on. Well, curiosity got the better of me. He left for groceries and I peeked. Just peeked. I thought maybe he had something down there he was hiding. Guns. Drugs. But when I opened the door, I heard crying. Real soft. Like someone was trying to stop themselves. Did you go down? I was scared and ashamed. I closed the door and left early. I told myself it was a recording, a television, anything. You didn't report it. And I hate myself for it. Walker took a breath, measuring his words. Do you think you'd be willing to give a formal statement? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I'll do it. That little girl deserves better. Thank you, he said sincerely. You may have just saved the case. After Darlene left, Walker called Ramirez. We've got our first real witness, he said. That's something, Ramirez replied. I've also got something for you. A name, one of the founders of Bright Pathways, Nathan Greeley. Former child psychologist, lost his license a few years back for unethical conduct. What kind of conduct? Falsified reports. Said he could fix trauma in adopted children. Pushed for aggressive behavioral treatment. He went quiet for a while, then popped up again as a consultant for Bright Pathways. Walker jotted down the name. Where is he now? Runs a private facility in South Carolina, not licensed, not monitored, calls it a healing retreat for troubled youth. Walker didn't reply for a moment. Then, slowly, he said, we need to find out if he's had other children like Anna. Ramirez exhaled. That's what I'm afraid of. By morning, the DA's office had received Darlene's affidavit. Combined with hospital reports and Wilkins' forged paperwork, it was finally enough to hold him without bail. Walker attended the arraignment, standing silently in the back of the courtroom as Peter Wilkins was brought in, shackled, eyes bloodshot. and smirking like none of it mattered. He pleaded not guilty. Walker clenched his fists. That smirk would be gone by the time he was done. Later that day, he returned to Mary Jo's Place Lesh. Anna was in the backyard, sitting beneath the maple tree with a coloring book. Her posture was more upright. Not confident, but less collapsed. Mary Jo watched her from the porch, arms folded. She asked for toast this morning, she said with a faint smile. Plain, no butter, but she asked. That's a start. Walker smiled slightly. That's more than a start. He walked down into the yard, careful not to startle Anna. Hey, he said softly. She looked up and gave the tiniest nod. I have something to tell you, he said, crouching beside her. The man who hurt you, he's going to stay in jail. He won't be coming back. She didn't speak, but she looked away, down at her drawing. Do you want to talk about anything? He asked gently. She hesitated, then pointed at a corner of the page where she'd drawn a shadowy figure. Bars again. But this time, a key hovered in the sky. What's that? He asked. She said, barely above a whisper. That's you. Duh. Walker blinked, the breath catching in his chest. She added, you had the key. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat. I'll always carry that key, Anna. Until you don't need it anymore. She looked at him for a long moment, and then, finally, her hand reached out not to push him away, but to hold. A simple, quiet gesture. But to Walker, it felt like a vow. He wouldn't stop until every child like Anna was free, until every key found its lock, and until every cage in Greenfield and beyond was broken open for good. The 2-lane highway to South Carolina cut through stretches of pine and abandoned gas stations, the kind of road where the world felt forgotten. Sheriff Roy Walker drove in silence, his cruiser humming beneath him. Beside him sat a worn leather folder inside it. Every page he'd collected on Nathan Greeley and Bright Pathways. The more he read, the more it stank. He glanced at the GPS. Still another 40 miles to Greeley's so-called healing retreat. No signs. No website. Just an address passed around, like a whisper. Walker had alerted the state police, but jurisdictional boundaries meant he was going alone for now. He didn't like it. But Anna's face stayed in his mind. And he wasn't waiting another day, while children could still be in danger. He pulled off onto a dirt road marked only by a crooked mailbox. Riverside Wellness Farm. The drive-in was long, lined with thick trees and silence. Finally, a wide clearing appeared. A 2-story white farmhouse stood at the center, surrounded by broken fencing and rusted swings. A woman in her 50s was hanging clothes on a line, pausing when she spotted his vehicle. Walker stepped out, flashing his badge. Morning, ma'am. Sheriff Roy Walker, Greenfield County, Georgia. She squinted. Georgia? I'm here about Nathan Greeley. Is he on the property? He's inside, she said cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. What's this about? Children, Walker said, voice steady. And whether they're safe here. Her eyes flicked to the house. You'll have to ask Nathan. Walker nodded, moving toward the front porch. As he approached, the door opened and a tall man with thinning hair stepped out, casual in slacks and a polo shirt. His smile was practiced too perfect. You must be Sheriff Walker, he said, extending a hand. Nathan Greeley. I heard someone was asking about me. Walker ignored the handshake. I'm looking into the placement of a child, Anna. Through Bright Pathways. She ended up in a cage, in my county. Greeley's smile didn't falter, but something shifted behind his eyes. That's tragic. But I haven't worked directly with placements in over a year. I consult on therapeutic care now. We help troubled kids adjust through routine and farm-based activities. It's all legal. Your name's on the paperwork, Walker said flatly. I was listed as a reference. Probably a clerical holdover. If someone forged my name, that's not on me. Walker stepped closer. You lost your psychology license for falsifying treatment records. And now you're running a retreat for vulnerable children without oversight? I'm running a private wellness program, Greeley said. With parental consent. Walker narrowed his eyes. Can I speak to the children here? That depends, Greeley replied coolly. You got a warrant? No, Walker said, voice hard. But I've got cause. Greeley folded his arms. Then I'll have to respectfully decline. Walker's fingers itched to call it in, to storm through the house, but legally he couldn't. Not yet. He looked past Greeley to the upstairs window, and for a split second, saw movement. A curtain shifted. A small shadow ducked away. Is Anna the only one this happened to? Walker asked, voice low. Greeley didn't answer. I'll be back, Walker said. And next time, I won't be alone. As he walked away, he heard Greeley call after him. Sheriff, you're not the first with a badge to try and find a story here. But stories don't win and court paper does. Back in the car, Walker called Ramirez. Get me the AG's office. I want this place investigated top to bottom. Health code, zoning, tax filings, whatever sticks. Ramirez hesitated. They'll push back. Greeley's got connections. Then we push harder. 2 days later, back in Greenfield, Walker met with the DA again. Darlene's statement had helped, but the case still needed more. Wilkins' lawyer was arguing that Anna's trauma made her testimony unreliable. They wanted the case tossed. He had her in a cage, Walker said through gritted teeth. And unless we get her to say that clearly and directly, the DA said, we're one bad cross-examination away from a mistrial. Walker knew what had to happen. He just hated what it would cost. That night, he drove back to Mary Jo's. Anna was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a picture book. She looked up as he entered. Hi, she said. One word, but brighter than before. Hey there, Walker said, sitting nearby. Mind if I talk to you a minute? She closed her book. You remember the man who hurt you? Anna nodded slowly. He's in jail now, but we need to tell the court what he did, so they can keep him there. Anna's fingers picked at the blanket. Do I have to? Walker exhaled. I wish you didn't. But if you feel strong enough, your words can make sure he never hurts anyone again. She was quiet for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, Will you be there? I'll be right beside you. Anna looked up. Her eyes held fear but also something else. The first flicker of courage. Okay, she said. I'll try. Walker nodded. That's all I need. As he left, Mary Jo followed him onto the porch. You sure about this? No, he said. But it's the only way. She looked toward the stars. Just don't let them break her. Walker's gaze was steady. I won't. And in that quiet, between the chimes and the crickets, Walker made another vow. If the system wanted paper, he'd give them fire, because behind every document, behind every forged form and fake signature, there were children. Real children. And no court in this country had the right to ignore them. The courtroom smelled of varnished wood and old paper, the kind of smell that seeped into your clothes and stayed with you. Sheriff Roy Walker sat on the front bench, hands folded, staring straight ahead as the bailiff called the room to order. Peter Wilkins sat at the defense table in a cheap suit, hair combed too neatly, his face scrubbed of the smugness it once carried. He looked like a man trying to appear harmless. Anna was not in the courtroom yet. The judge, an older man named Raymond Cates, adjusted his glasses and looked over the docket. Today's proceedings concern the testimony of the minor victim in the State versus Peter Wilkins. Miss Kelly, are you prepared? The assistant DA, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, stood and nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The child is waiting in the witness room. She's ready. Walker wasn't sure if that was true, but he knew Anna had agreed bravely, despite the tremble in her voice, despite the nights she still woke crying. She said she would try. That was more than anyone could ask of a 6-year-old. Mary Jo was allowed to accompany her to the stand, not beside her but within eyesight, sitting quietly on a nearby bench. As Anna was escorted in, small and fragile in a soft yellow dress Mary Jo had picked out, the entire courtroom held its breath. She walked slowly, holding the hand of a court-appointed advocate, her eyes darting like a bird's. When she reached the witness chair, she climbed up and looked straight at Judge Cates, not the man who'd locked her away. You're safe here, Anna, the judge said gently. Can you tell me your name? Anna, she whispered. Can you tell me how old you are? 6. The DA stood and approached slowly. Hi, Anna. Do you remember me? I came to visit you with Sheriff Walker. Anna nodded once. I know this is a lot, the DA said kindly. We just want to understand what happened. You can use your words, or if you'd rather draw or point, we'll do our best to understand. Anna's hand shook slightly as she gripped the edge of the chair. Then, slowly, she began to speak. He put me in the basement, she said. He said I was too loud. Too much trouble. Who did? The DA asked gently. She pointed across the room, her hand trembling. Him. Wilkins flinched. The courtroom stayed silent. Did he hurt you? The DA asked. Anna nodded. He didn't hit with fists. But he didn't feed me. And he yelled. A lot. And he locked the cage. There it was, the word that mattered. The word no one wanted to hear from a child's mouth. Was there anyone else? No, Anna said. Only me in the dark. Walker felt his chest tighten. The DA paused, then asked, Anna, can you tell us why you didn't say anything before? Because he said no one would believe me, she whispered. And I didn't know I could be safe. A tear rolled down Mary Jo's cheek. The defense attorney stood. Anna, did Mr. Wilkins ever tell you that he loved you? Walker nearly rose from his seat. Anna blinked. He said that sometimes. And did he ever give you toys, food? Did he ever read to you? Yes, she said, but only when people were watching. Could it be that you misunderstood his intentions? Maybe he was trying to help you and it just felt scary? Anna's face darkened, and for the first time, her voice rose. Helping doesn't hurt. Helping doesn't lock you, eh? The courtroom fell dead silent again. The judge leaned forward. That will be enough for today. Anna, you did something very brave. She looked at Walker then, and he gave her a nod. After she was escorted out, the DA requested the statement be entered into evidence. The judge granted it. Wilkins sat frozen, the smirk now completely gone, his palms sweating on the table. Later, back in the waiting room, Walker found Anna sitting on the couch, Mary Jo beside her. The little girl looked up as he entered. I did it, she said. You sure did, he replied. Will he go away forever? Walker crouched down. That's up to the judge. But I can promise this, he'll never hurt you again. Anna nodded. And then, unexpectedly, leaned forward and hugged him. Walker's arms folded around her gently. The kind of embrace that didn't ask questions or offer false promises, just truth and warmth. The next morning, word spread across Greenfield. The girl had spoken, the man had been charged on all counts, and for once, the town began to talk. People stopped Walker at the diner. At the gas station, they asked if they could help, how they'd missed the signs, what they should have done differently. It was too late to undo the silence, but it wasn't too late to change. That night, Mary Jo sat with Anna on the porch swing, the stars blinking above them. The breeze smelled of honeysuckle and something new hope. Are you tired? Mary Jo asked. A little, Anna said. Do you want me to read to you? Number I want to draw. And so she did. And this time, there were no cages in the picture. Just a house, a tree, and 3 people sitting side by side under a sky filled with light. The courthouse had barely settled from the tremor Anna's testimony had caused, when Sheriff Walker found himself summoned to a different kind of battle, the kind fought not in front of a jury, but in the shadows of politics and paperwork. He sat stiffly across from County Commissioner Ellery Tompkins, whose office smelled faintly of cigar, smoke, and aged leather. Roy, Tompkins said, his voice like gravel wrapped in honey. You've stirred up a real storm. Phones ringing off the hook, reporters sniffing around, civil rights attorneys calling from Atlanta. You sure you want to keep poking this hornet's nest? Walker didn't flinch. That little girl was locked in a cage less than 3 miles from our town square. You think I'm worried about headlines? I'm saying there's a way to handle things, Tompkins said, gesturing vaguely, quietly, respectfully. You shine too bright a light, and people start seeing things they're not ready to deal with. Maybe it's time they saw. The commissioner leaned back. And what if this Greeley fellow you've been chasing turns out to have friends in high places? You really want to bet your badge on this? Walker stood slowly. If exposing child abuse means risking my badge, I'll turn it in today. Tompkins didn't stop him as he left, but his eyes followed like cold steel. Back at the station, Ramirez was waiting. We got a subpoena. For what? Greeley's financials, emails, client rosters. It's official now. State Attorney's Office is backing us. Walker felt a flicker of satisfaction. Finally. But there's something else, Ramirez said, lowering his voice. We found 3 more children placed by Bright Pathways in nearby counties. All under similar circumstances, private agreements, no state oversight, no school enrollment. 2 of them haven't been seen in months. Walker cursed under his breath. Get me the sheriffs in those counties. We're not letting this disappear. Over the next week, Greenfield transformed. Where once there had been whispers, now there was movement. A candlelight vigil was held for children who had slipped through the cracks. Mary Jo spoke at the library about fostering, not just the legal duties, but the soul of it, showing up, staying up, choosing love over convenience. Anna watched it all from the safety of her new world. She still didn't like loud sounds, still flinched when someone knocked too hard. But her steps were firmer now, her eyes less guarded, and she had started to talk more. About colors, about her drawings, about things she wished she'd known existed sooner: peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, bubble baths, soft music on the radio. One evening, as Walker sat on Mary Jo's porch sipping coffee, Anna appeared with a question. Do people get in trouble for helping bad guys? Walker looked at her, setting his cup down. Sometimes. Why do you ask? She hesitated, then said, when Mr. Wilkins was on the phone, he used to say, they're sending more. Walker's posture straightened. More what? I don't know, but he said it a lot. He said he had friends in the system. Walker exchanged a glance with Mary Jo, who had come to the doorway silently. Do you remember any names? He asked softly. Anna furrowed her brow, thinking hard. There was a man. He came once in a black car. Gave Mr. Wilkins a white envelope. They talked in the garage. I watched through the cracks. Do you remember what he looked like? Bald, glasses, had a shiny watch. See, Walker took mental notes like lightning. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, he drove to Atlanta to meet with a state-level investigator, Special Agent Desiree Vaughn. She was sharp, fast-talking, and didn't care for small-town politics. You've got a trafficking ring hiding under a paper adoption scam, she said, scanning the files. If you're right about this Greeley connection, we're talking federal. Walker nodded. I don't need the credit. I just want them stopped. You'll have it, Vaughn said. But I need more than anecdotes and old paperwork. I need proof that money changed hands. That kids were sold. Walker handed her a copy of Darlene's updated affidavit and the notes from Anna's new memory. It's not enough, Vaughn said honestly, but it's the start of a noose. Walker drove back to Greenfield that night under a stormy sky. Rain splattered the windshield as thunder rolled in the distance. In his gut, he knew they were closer than ever and that someone else out there knew it, too. At Mary Jo's, the wind had knocked over a flower pot. Anna ran outside in her pajamas to rescue it, her small hands gripping the cracked ceramic like it was treasure. Walker stepped out of the car, umbrella in hand. Careful, you'll catch cold, he said. Anna looked up at him, her smile faint but real. It's just water. She stood there, soaked and defiant, her tiny feet planted in the mud, and Walker knew, no matter how big this case got, no matter how far it reached, it would always come back to this. One child, once forgotten, now refusing to be invisible. He took off his coat and draped it over her. Let's go inside, kiddo. The storm had only just begun. The lobby of Greenfield Sheriff's Station felt cavernous in the midday sun, quiet, empty, yet heavy with unsaid things. Sheriff Roy Walker sat at his desk, the file in front of him overflowing with documents. Financial statements from Bright Pathways, proprietary emails from Nathan Greeley, affidavits from neighbors, and Anna's testimony. Every page bore the weight of human lives and bureaucratic fractures. Across from him, seated rigidly, was D.A. Kelly Turner. Her expression was calm but intense. This is substantial, Roy, she said, tapping the folder. Financial fraud, falsified adoption records, unauthorized placements, and possibly human trafficking. Walker nodded. Makes me sick to say it, but yes. Turner sighed. We're coordinating with the state investigator. We can bring federal charges. But you know what they'll ask for next. I know, Walker said quietly. More evidence. Names. Paper trails. Turner slid over a legal pad. You have until Monday to formalize a witness list. Include anyone Anna might remember. The neighbor. Everyone. We file this by Wednesday morning. Walker's heartbeat slowed. He had everything he needed to break this network. Do it. As Turner left, Walker stared at Anna's drawing on his desk from that morning, circles of crayons. A house open, no locked bars. It gave him a ragged hope. Later, he drove out to the farmland on the edge of town to check in on Anna. Mary Jo led him through the quiet hallway, where Anna sat coloring by the window, flowers filling page after page. Morning, Anna, Walker said softly. She looked up, smiled faintly. Sheriff, she replied. You've been doing great, he said quietly. Are you okay with the plan for Monday? Anna bowed her head. If I have to. Walker sighed. I know you're brave, but if you change your mind, I'll tell the court you're not ready. She nodded stiffly. I'll try. Mary Jo stepped forward. I'll be there with her the whole time. Walker nodded gratefully. Thank you. Monday arrived with the soft patter of spring rain. Walker spent the day coordinating witnesses: Darlene, Hank Morrison, the IT student who recovered video, even the DA's office helping finalize paperwork. By mid-afternoon, the courtroom was packed. Media glare filtered in through tall windows, and whispers filled the gallery. Anna sat beside Mary Jo, clutching her mother's hand. Walker, in the back, scanned the room. There were federal agents, sympathetic neighbors, reporters, all waiting. When Karen Elmhurst's fake signature and Greeley's forged credentials were laid out through witnesses, murmurs rippled through the audience. Every fraudulent form, bill payment, and suppressed report erected a clearer picture of orchestrated deception. Then Darlene took the stand. Her voice shook, but firm. I heard the crying through that basement door, she said. I didn't act. But Sheriff Walker and that little girl, she gave me the courage. A reporter caught Walker's eye. He gave a curt nod, holding back emotion. Then it was Anna's turn. She rose unsteadily, stepping into the glare of the courtroom lights. Walker felt time slow. The prosecutor spoke gently. Anna, you're safe here. Can you tell us what happened when Sheriff Walker found you? Anna's small voice echoed. He helped me. They put me in a cage. He brought me out. No one made a sound. Her gaze wandered briefly to Wilkins, now pale and silent. She continued, voice steady. No one should ever be locked up. Not anyone. Outside the walls of the courtroom, a storm raged, but here, time paused. Later, when Anna had left with Mary Jo, Walker approached the DA. She placed a folder in his hand, news coverage, statements, solidarity letters from child welfare organizations. This is the movement now, she said softly. Not just Greenfield, but statewide. Walker exhaled. That's justice. That evening, at Mary Jo's house, the three sat around the kitchen table. Anna sipped warm milk, the snipping of blue pen across paper accompanied by distant thunder. You did it, Walker said, gently nudging her, drawing the one filled with sunshine and laughter. Anna looked up. He won't hurt anyone else. Walker nodded, voice thick. He never will. Mary Jo smiled softly. You helped a whole bunch of kids, Anna. Anna's expression was grave yet hopeful. Did we win? Not fully, Walker said. But we stopped this path. And with federal attention now, we can shut it down. Anna considered that, then asked in a small voice, Does that mean I can sleep through the night now? Walker leaned forward. Yes, he whispered. Yes, you can. Outside, the rain turned to soft drumming on the rooftop. Inside, a wounded town began to rebuild. One brave girl, one honest officer, standing tall in the quiet after the storm. The midday sun glimmering through the courthouse windows seemed particularly harsh that morning. Sheriff Roy Walker sat just beyond the defense table, watching Assistant DA Kelly Turner orchestrate the next stage of the hearing. His presence felt heavier now, no longer a lone guardian of one child, but a force for justice stretching far beyond Greenfield's quiet streets. When the bailiff called the room to order, Walker glanced toward Anna, who sat beside Mary Jo, her small fingers interlaced with the children's advocates. She looked both fragile and terrifyingly brave. She had testified before, and today, though not the central witness, her presence carried weight. It was a courtroom arranged with intention, and every spectator knew what was at stake. The DA stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, as part of the expansion of this case, we've secured records tying Bright Pathways and Nathan Greeley to multiple fraudulent placements across state lines. We call Inspector Vaughn from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation." Desiree Vaughn, fresh-faced but steely-eyed, emerged and took the stand, her voice unwavering as she laid out financial transfers, falsified reports, and lists of children placed without state oversight. Each document felt like another breath of truth. Walker watched, fists clenched in his lap, when Vaughn presented evidence of children withdrawn suddenly, some vanishing entirely from local systems, no enrolled school records, no health reports. Walker's pulse quickened. This was no isolated abuse. This was exploitation woven into paper. Cross-examination from Wilkins' attorney tried to negate Greeley's ties, but Vaughn remained steadfast. Emails, receipts, even photographic proof of payments. It was a paper fortress, and Walker had helped build every brick. Midway through, Turner called Darlene Mott to the stand again. Her cheeks were pale, her belt of courage thinner today, but her eyes steady. "I heard the crying before," she said, voice trembling. "I thought it was a nightmare. But I acted. Now I know how much my silence cost." Walker's chest tightened. Silence cost too much already. Next, they heard from the IT student who had recovered the deleted video. He described recovering footage of Anna's faint, terrified face behind lopsided bars. The courtroom gasped. Walker forced himself to breathe. That girl had sat in that cage, believing she might die in silence. Finally, Wilkins' lawyer spoke with calm denial. Anna's trauma made her unreliable, but Walker no longer feared them. Justice had Anna's words, the documents, the witnesses. Lies would crumble here. Judge Cates cleared his throat. "Based on this new evidence, the motion to expand charges is granted. Nathan Greeley, you are to remain in custody pending federal indictment." A wave of relief washed over Walker. It was not just about Greenfield anymore. It was about every child under the weight of corrupt systems. Later that day, in the sheriff's lobby, Walker and Turner debriefed. "We did it," Turner said softly. "But now, we take them completely down." Walker nodded. "We will. With Vaughn's help, and others, this ends." They shook hands. A partnership forged in light and sharp papers. That evening, Walker drove the country roads back to Mary Jo's house. Anna was waiting on the porch with a new drawing. A group of children, girls, and boys standing in sunlight. Under a big tree with open branches, she drew the kids who never had a home. Mary Jo said softly when Walker knelt beside the picture. "She's thinking of them now." Walker smiled, voice hoarse. "We're going to help make sure they have homes worth having." Inside, Anna handed him a crayon. "Will you draw with me?" He grabbed a clean sheet and scribbled beside her a small house with open windows. Together, they drew children looking out, stepping into light. By the next morning, Greenfield was transformed. Local newspapers hailed it as the uncovering of a hidden network of adoption fraud. Child welfare agencies across the state reopened closed cases. Vigilance replaced complacency. The movement had begun. Walker stood at his desk in the sheriff's office, staring at Anna's drawing now taped to his wall. "Children free, under light, together." Below it, a small note from Anna. "Justice is a group of us together." He exhaled, realizing she was right. Tomorrow, he would prepare for long interviews with federal investigators. He would testify, press charges, ensure every document, every witness, every broken system was repaired. But tonight, under that drawing, he felt peaceful for the first time in years, because justice had rippled outward, and its echoes would be felt by children, once trapped, now finally free. Sheriff Roy Walker entered the federal grand jury room early, long before most people stirred. The hum of fluorescent lights above felt harsher inside these walls. He carried with him the weight of responsibility, not just for Anna, but for every child caught in the silent corners of corrupt systems. Papers in hand, he took the seat near the front, watching Special Agent Desiree Vaughn shuffle into place with imposing efficiency. Around the table, other investigators sat quietly. State child welfare officials, representatives from the Department of Justice. Their eyes were sharp, their posture taut with anticipation. Walker cleared his throat, feeling the hush settle like a thick blanket. For this moment, the room existed solely to listen. Vaughn began with crisp testimony, detailing financial records that traced money flowing from desperate parents, through the shell of Bright Pathways, into offshore accounts traced to Greeley's contacts. She named forged documents, certificate stamps with mismatched ink, social workers who never visited homes, and placements approved without any background checks. Walker felt his pulse slow. This was the foundation of their case, but the files were still cold words on paper. He leaned forward when Vaughn nodded to him. He stood, voice steady. Your Honors, I've served Greenfield for over a decade. I was there when a 6-year-old girl, Anna, was found locked in a metal cage in her own basement. She suffered bruises, dehydration, and terror. The man charged as her guardian claimed it was discipline. He paused. Papers rustled around the table. This girl is alive today because someone called 911. Because community members spoke up. Because law enforcement refused to let silence win. He held up a crayon, Anna's drawing of children standing free under a tree. This wasn't just about one case. After Anna's rescue, we found more. 3 other children placed under dangerous and illegal circumstances, all orchestrated through the same network. He scanned the jurors, one by one. We're not here to lock up guilty men. We're here to lock down the systems that let them operate. Broken systems don't excuse broken hearts. M. Sector. Silence fell heavy after he spoke. Vaughn nodded. The panel took notes. By late afternoon, the hearing was adjourned. The lead prosecutor thanked Walker personally. You didn't just build a file, she said. You built a movement. Walker didn't smile. All he could think about was the children still out there. That evening, the flicker of twilight lit Mary Jo's living room. Walker entered to find Anna surrounded by new friends, 2 young girls from the neighborhood drawing and coloring on the floor. Their chatter was soft, hesitant, hopeful. Mary Jo watched from the armchair, knitting needles idle. She glanced up at Walker, offering a warm nod. He crouched down, scanning the scene. Anna looked up at him with clear eyes, the kind that no longer flinched. I have news, Walker said softly as he sat beside Anna. The other girls listened. What news? Anna asked. The grand jury moves forward, he said. They'll indict Greeley, his associates, and anyone who backed them. The girls gasped in unison. Will you help me tell the truth again when they ask? Walker asked gently of Anna. She nodded. Firm this time. Without hesitation. The other girls looked at her with awe. I've got a feeling the world's going to be full of stories like yours soon, he said, brushing her hair. Stories where kids are saved and believed. 2 days later, Greenfield hosted a press conference in the courthouse square. The air smelled of early spring, freshly cut grass, blooming dogwood. Citizens, some in coats, some with umbrellas assembled on folding chairs. Reporters stood with microphones, cameras raised. Sheriff Walker stood at the podium, Anna and Mary Jo at his side. His voice carried over the hush. Today, we stand not just for Anna, not just for Greenfield, but for every child whose voice was stolen by paper lies. Thanks to your courage, the grand jury has returned indictments against Bright Pathways and key individuals, including Nathan Greeley. Applause rippled through the crowd. Anna looked up from Mary Jo's grasp. Eyes bright but quiet. We will not stop until every lead is pursued, Walker continued. Until every child is accounted for. And when the system fails, we will stand up and fill the silence. Reporter flashes bloomed. Citizens stood, some teary-eyed, some nodding in understanding. Anna tugged on Walker's sleeve. Can I say something? He smiled, motioning her forward. She climbed the podium steps, small but determined. This isn't just my story, she whispered, voice steady. It can be anyone's until we make it stop. Thank you for helping me. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in respectful, sustained applause. That night, as Walker drove home under a moonlit sky, that image stayed with him. A little girl, stepping into the light, refusing to be silent. At his home desk, he pulled out Anna's crayon drawing finely framed. The house, tree, children standing free, all etched under bright daylight. He added a note at the bottom. Hope can hold a broken world together. He exhaled, feeling the truth settle heavy but right. Because justice, he realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about giving voice to the voiceless and trusting them when they spoke. And somewhere in a courtroom, some system had been forced to listen. Morning came early in Greenfield, and with it a quiet hope that felt tangible in the cool spring air. Sheriff Walker woke before dawn, leaning by the open window of his home office, watching the perimeter of Mary Jo's yard fade into gentle golden light. Above Anna's drawing now framed on his desk, the children stood free under a bright sun. He traced the lines with his eyes, imagining the world slowly opening beyond that picture. Today was jury selection day for Greeley's federal trial. He dressed in his uniform iron blue shirt, polished badge, the weight of duty settled around his shoulders, driving to downtown Atlanta. Each mile carried a steadier resolve. They were doing more than chasing a single predator. They were shining a light into dark corners where neglect had thrived. The federal courtroom stood austere and formal. Tall columns held silent witness to the justice about to unfold. Walker took a seat near the prosecution table, beside Assistant DA Turner and Agent Vaughn. Across the room, Greeley sat with a haggard expression and legal counsel who scoured every face like targets. Over the next hour, potential jurors were examined: older adults, professionals, parents, retirees, still steeped in civic duty. Their questions were gentle. Can you be fair? Have you ever trusted papers over people? One older woman, a retired teacher named Eleanor, offered quiet defiance. I believe in children's stories. A drawing in a child's hand can speak truths that papers cannot. Walker watched her nod slightly at him, nodded back. He felt, in that exchange, how Anna's voice had become theirs, an echo haunting every document, every statistic, every plea for justice. After court, Walker returned to Greenfield. He drove through streets waking up, flower boxes opening, church steeples coated in morning light, neighbors sipping coffee on porches. The world they had imagined was waking too. He stopped at Mary Jo's to check on Anna. The little girl sat on the front step, swing on her lap, eyes glassy in the sunrise. How are you holding up? Walker asked softly. Anna shrugged. Today I might talk on television, but I'm not scared. He sat beside her. You're brave, he replied gently. Remember, your words carry more weight than anything. She blinked up at him. He paused, then asked quietly, Would you like to draw again sometime? She nodded slowly. Can we draw homes this time? Her voice was less fragile, rooted now in possibility. Absolutely, he said. Homes with open doors. That afternoon, Walker met with Special Agent Vaughn in the sheriff's office. The case was piling upward: federal indictments, subpoenas, multi-state investigations. Vaughn handed over a folder. We've found evidence of contact between Greeley and local officials, communications suggesting financial ties. Not just adoptive fraud, but bribery. We're crossing thresholds with this. Walker's heartbeat quickened. They were stepping beyond one network into exposure of deeper rot. Let's map it out, he said, voice steady. Let's trace it all. That evening, Walker walked into the living room where Anna and Mary Jo were reading a book by the window. Margins of light turned gold as dusk settled. Anna looked up. How's the jury selection? She asked. He smiled. Slow but prepared. We're finding people who listen with more than ears. She closed her book. Like you did. He exhaled, voice catching. And you did. They sat together in gentle silence, the room alive with small comfort. Back at home later, Walker wrote, his journal reflected what narrative gerontology calls building inside out and outside in, stories giving meaning to trauma with truth, transforming fragmented fear into coherent resolve. He thought of Anna, of the jurors, of every document laid bare. He knew justice wasn't a fast current. It was a slow river that, once set in motion, carried truth across borders and silences. On his wall hung the drawing, children stepping into sunlight. Beneath it, he added a new note. Light finds cracks, and sometimes those cracks let brightness flood a broken room. Outside, Greenfield exhaled its streets no longer hushed by fear, but pulsing with voices, with stories held up and honored. And in that quiet, between the rustle of paper and the winding path to the courtroom, one narrative held them all. Of a little girl brave enough to break her silence, and a town awake enough to hear it. The courtroom felt both immense and intimate that morning. Rows of jurors, retired teachers, nurses, small business owners, sat in sober attention. Sheriff Roy Walker and Assistant DA Kelly Turner stood at the front. Anna wasn't present yet. Today was the day to shape the narrative that would accompany the verdict. Kelly cleared her throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard testimony. We've seen documents. We know how Anna was rescued, how documents were forged, how children were placed without oversight. She paused, letting the weight settle. Now, we have the power to say not just that Greeley is guilty, but that the system must become better. The jurors nodded, pens already poised. Walker braced himself. It was his turn. He stepped forward. I asked Anna once what justice meant to her. She said, a key that opens a door. I think this case is more than an indictment, it's that key. Because if a single child can slip through cracks, how many can? Silence filled the room, thick as dusk. The rest of his statement wove between facts and quiet urgency. He spoke of paper networks that preyed on hope, of neighbors who looked away, of a 6-year-old's voice piercing through complacency. Weeks later, Greeley and his associates stood indicted on federal charges. The papers and the institutions behind them were being held accountable. Outside the courthouse, spring had turned to early summer. Greenfield's sidewalks shone golden, dotted with daisies and small flags planted by the Vigil Committee to remember children who needed saving. Walker walked past them, the morning sun warming his shoulders. He stopped at Mary Jo's home, drawn by the hum of children's laughter. Inside, Anna and 2 friends were sitting at the table, coloring a large mural. They had drawn a townhouses painted open, trees in bloom, people holding hands. Walker joined them, adding a sun in the corner. Anna looked up. Look, we're all together now. Her voice was soft but radiant. The mural vibrated with unanimous possibility. That afternoon, Walker and Kelly pored over the indictment paperwork. It extended beyond Greeley, naming complicit professionals, lawyers, smug social workers, public officials who had enabled the network. The movement was broadening, fed by courage and detailed narrative. Kelly exhaled, eyes fierce. We'll dismantle this completely. Start with tighter oversight, forced home visits, adoption transparency. Walker nodded. No child should be a story, only a story waiting to be heard. Evening settled gently. Walker stepped onto his porch as dusk painted the sky in lavender. Anna wandered out, holding a small notebook. She drew a story, Mary Jo said from behind him. Each page is a picture. Today she has 5. Walker beckoned her over. What's this about? He asked. Anna opened the notebook. On yellowed paper, a little girl holding keys, a house door swinging wide, a courtroom. Text scrawled in crayon. Keys open doors. Words can open doors too. Walker felt tears sting. Inside that child's drawing lay the essence of narrative truth. How stories saved them and how they could change worlds. Later, Walker sat at his desk. Anna's drawings taped to the walls, a growing archive of resilience. His sketchpad lay open, words forming beneath his pen. A story is more than a record. It is justice in motion. He remembered the formal term narrative gerontology and its concept of inside and outside stories, the story one lives and the story one tells. Here, Anna's inside story, her fear, her hope, her voice was now open, shared, transforming the outside. A narrative once broken was now the blueprint for rebuilding trust. Outside, the town lights blinked awake, each window a story waiting to be heard. And in Greenfield, the ripple continued. Greenfield's dawn broke with a hush bird singing over lawns dotted with tulips, morning dew glistening on fences, and a gentle hum from the town's newly rebuilt spirit. Sheriff Roy Walker stepped outside for his first cup of coffee, breathing deeply. He'd navigated a storm for months now, but this morning poured him quiet hope instead of dread. The courthouse bells rang softly in the distance, a reminder that the battle hadn't ended yet. Trials were pending, indictments still lined for execution, and policies were waiting to be rewritten. But for one moment, right now, the world felt unbroken. By mid-morning, Walker headed into the station calm, confident, purpose renewed. His office felt different. Anna's drawings were now joined by letters handwritten thank you notes from across the state. Teachers, social workers, strangers saying, "Your courage helped turn words into change." He slipped one into his coat pocket, a message from a foster parent, saying they had reconsidered closure after reading about Anna's bravery. Ramirez knocked and entered with 2 steaming coffees. "We got copies of the newly enforced oversight policies the state passed," he said. "Mandatory home visits, third-party audits of adoption agencies, transparency requirements. It's not perfect, but it's progress." Walker nodded, sipped coffee. "Anna's voice carries farther than we thought." They turned to the stacks of case files again. More suspicious placements, blank adoption forms, gaps where records should be. Now they had jurisdiction, legal support, and public momentum to dig deeper. That afternoon, Mary Jo called. Anna had something to show. Walker drove to her home, sunlight warm on the windshield. Inside, Anna held 2 pieces of paper. One, her usual drawing. A home with the door wide open and light spilling out. The other, something new, was a letter addressed to the people who stopped the darkness. Walker read it aloud, voice soft. "Thank you for believing me. For giving me words. I drew pictures to show how loud silence can be. Now, I draw our future." He looked up to see tears in Anna's eyes, bright, unwavering. "Your words are the brightest," he said, kneeling to her level. "You gave us all the light." Back at the station, Walker and Ramirez held the new policy manuals and drafted outreach plans for schools, churches, parent groups. Walker envisioned training sessions, workshops, community gatherings around listening to children, protecting truth. He added notes. "Invite foster parents, social workers, educators. Use Anna's drawing and story. Teach the power of asking questions." When the list was long enough to stretch across 2 pages, he felt the weight of the moment. From a single call to a community anchored in vigilance. That evening, word spread of Anna's letter. The local paper ran her drawing on the front page with the caption, "Hope writes its own story." Across town, people paused, reading, thinking, stirring awake from complacency. Walker heard from an old friend at the state legislature. "We'll back you on enforcement," from a retired teacher. The silence ended because you listened. Ripples joined. Building. Weeks later, a town meeting filled the community center. Tables lined with coffee and cookies. Parents chatted quietly before Walker stood up. With Anna by his side, he addressed the crowd. "We're not finished," he said simply. "But today, we begin our next chapter. Safeguarding innocence, honoring voices, and ensuring no child remains unseen again." He handed Anna the mic. She cleared her throat, small but steady. "If you have doubts, just listen," she said. "Silence isn't empty, it's loud, but we can listen together." The room held its breath, then erupted into soft applause, not loud, but full of promise. That night, Walker sat alone at his desk, journal open. He wrote, "From the darkest silence, a story rose, not just Anna's, but ours. And now, each word we speak, each policy we build, each time we see a child and ask, we honor that rise." Outside, Greenfield street lamps glowed gently, houses lit by life, light spilling from open doors. Inside, a community had learned that when one voice is heard, many can follow. And this was only the beginning. The dawn light that filtered through the curtains felt gentle, threaded with promise, like a whisper that said healing could become reality. Sheriff Roy Walker stood near his desk, scanning a stack of mail. Most was routine policy updates, press clippings, community invitations, but one envelope stood out. The looping handwriting belonged to Anna. He slid a knife under the seal and unfolded 3 pages of crayon and pencil script. I drew us in a room instead of cages. Now I write our stories. I'm not scared of words anymore. Will you teach me more? Walker let the words settle. This was no mere thank you note. It was a testament to the power of expressive storytelling, where trauma is transmuted into hope and art becomes agency. Studies support that art therapy enables children to access and process trauma even when words fail them, giving them control over pain they're still learning to name, end quote. He slid the letter into his suit pocket, his heart both heavy and buoyant. He thought of narrative gerontology, the notion that crafting one's life as story can bring meaning, healing, and purpose. Though Anna was young, she was already authoring a narrative rich with courage and transformation. That afternoon, Walker met with Mary Jo and Anna in their sunlit living room. Anna perched at the table, colored pencils scattered like constellations. Mary Jo quietly nodded to Walker, giving him room. He sat across from Anna and said, "You wrote something beautiful. You asked to learn more. How do you feel about telling your story? Through your words." Anna studied the pencils. "I want to draw what happens next." She looked at him with matter-of-fact resolve. "About us." Walker's throat tightened. "I'd be honored." Mary Jo squeezed his shoulder. Maybe we can help more kids do the same." Over the next few weeks, Walker initiated an art and story circle in Greenfield's community center. He invited local therapists and teachers to help children create stories and illustrations that spoke to their feelings, not just trauma, but hope, identity, belonging. Expressive therapies like this weave narrative, art, and community together in healing ways. Anna attended every session, shy at first, then bold. She taught other kids how to draw open doors, bright suns, friends holding hands. Thin lines thickened into stories full of life. Community members came to see. Parents wept quietly. Teachers gathered notes. Walker stood at the back, watching growth tiny, tender, unstoppable. One evening, Anna held up her final page. A village with open homes, light streaming out on every window pane, and children playing in streets wrapped in flowers. Beneath it, she wrote, "We heal together." Walker's eyes stung. This wasn't just a drawing, it was a mandate, a vision, an ember passing from one small hand to another. Months later, Walker sat before a microphone on a modest stage, preparing to speak at the state's Child Welfare Summit. Behind him hung a blown-up poster of Anna's drawing, open homes, bright paths, collective healing. He tapped the podium, thought of every child silenced by systems and those now finding their voices through art. He began, "Healing is a narrative. Not one we impose, but one we listen to, wait for, care for, and carry forward. I stand here because one 6-year-old didn't let silence overshadow her story." He paused, looking into the gathered faces, policymakers, educators, counselors all leaning in. "This," he said, gesturing to the drawing, "is why we must write the world differently. Not with arrest warrants alone, but with crayons. With kindness, because hope, once drawn, redraws us all." Applause rose. It wasn't performative, it was collective recognition that life as story was not only survival, but healing. And in that moment, the narrative shifted from trauma to trust, from silence to expression, from fear to community. Walker knew the work would continue. There would be legal battles, more systems to fix, more children to hear, but now, beneath Anna's drawing and nighttime pages, lay proof that the most powerful justice often begins with a quiet page and the courage to fill it. A soft spring drizzle tapped against the windows of the Greenfield Community Center, as if the sky itself were applauding the resilience within. Sheriff Roy Walker found himself in the common room, an open space filled with tables and easels set up for an afternoon of creative healing. He surveyed the scene. Children clustered in small groups, sketching stories with crayons and colored pencils. Parents and mentors floated among them, offering quiet encouragement and admiration. At the heart of one such group, Anna was bent over her paper, working with focused intensity. Next to her, 2 younger children watched in wide-eyed wonder as she drew a village under bright sunshine. Beside her, Mary Jo smiled softly, and beyond that, Walker felt a shift in something deep. From community awareness to community embrace. A volunteer art therapist, Jacob Warmide, mid-30s, approached Walker gently. People are coming in, asking how startups like this began. Some local schools are partnering now. Walker nodded. That's good. Let's keep it growing. Jacob smiled. You're building something bigger than you know. Walker glanced at Anna's group. A girl across the table had a tear-streaked page, scribbled in dark lines. Anna leaned over and quietly offered her a new crayon. The little girl sniffled, took it, and began to color light over the dark. More than skill, it required compassion. Lesson by living lesson. Later, Walker walked outside into the mist. The garden outside bloomed in color: tulips, lilacs, daffodils, each petal a reminder that beauty could emerge, even after ruin. In his pocket, he still carried Anna's 3-page letter, the one where she asked to write our stories together. That letter had grown into these workshops. And now, stories were multiplying. A soft voice called, "Sheriff Walker?" He turned to see the principal of the local primary school, Miss Delgado. Her posture was hesitant but hopeful. "We'd like to bring the art workshops into our school curriculum," she said. "Music, art, creative expression. Teach the children to say what they feel before we fail to hear it." Walker's throat tightened. "I'll support whatever you need." Walking home after, Walker reflected on the journey. From that first call, "Help. She's locked in a cage," to a classroom full of children who now saw color where once there was fear. Anna's voice had become a spark. At home, Walker settled by the desk where Anna's drawing hung, now joined by a mural from the workshop, a landscape bathed in sunlight, bridges instead of prison bars. Beneath it, Anna had written, "Art builds bridges when words stumble." He sat and placed the framed letters from Anna on the desk. 1, the initial drawing that ignited a movement. 2, the letter requesting storytelling. 3, the thoughtful mural-filled note. Each page a chapter of unbroken hope. He closed his eyes, remembering the narrative gerontology concept. Rewriting one's traumatic story gives healing and agency back to the storyteller. Anna wasn't just healing, she was leading. In law, in policy, but most beautifully in art. Days later, Walker and Mary Jo attended a town celebration in the community center courtyard. Tables arranged under colorful streamers, local musicians strumming lullabies, families gathered to share stories, art, and cake. A banner read, "Greenfield listens." Anna's mural was displayed front and center. Neighbors paused by it. Some took photos. A young man in a crisp suit introducing himself as the county commissioner came by and read the caption. "This is powerful," he said. "We need to replicate this in every county." Walker watched Anna standing nearby, glowing in twilight, a girl who once trembled inside a locked basement, now proud under sunlight. He moved closer. She looked up. "Great turnout," she said softly. "It is," he agreed. She handed him a folded drawing. Herself, parents, teachers, officers all holding hands under a rainbow. He caught a note at the bottom. "We're safer when we hold hands. The world changed one hand at a time." Drawn by a child brave enough to speak truth. And Greenfield would never be the same. Sheriff Walker looked at that mural, that rainbow, and he understood fully. Justice isn't just laws or sentences, it is the art of building trust. One bridge, one drawing, one story at a time. Morning light gently filtered through the tall windows of the Greenfield Community Center, illuminating rows of freshly displayed art, bright, hopeful, defiant. Children's drawings blossomed across the walls, open doors, blazing suns, colorful hands reaching out. At the center hung Anna's rainbow scene, bold and unmissable. "We're safer when we hold hands." Sheriff Roy Walker stood back, drinking in the sight. It was exhibition day, the culmination of months of healing, justice, art, and community. Today, policymakers, educators, foster parents, and townsfolk would witness the power of one girl's voice turned into collective action. From the front row, a hush passed through the crowd as Anna stepped up to the podium. Mary Jo stood at her side, pride carved on her gentle face. Walker watched, heart taut. "When I drew cages," Anna began, voice steadier than anyone expected. I was trying to show how dark silence can be. But when you listened, really listened, you helped me draw light again. She paused and looked out at the audience. Each picture I drew, each story we made, helped me heal. But more than that, it helped all of us see how we can care for each other. Her small frame glowed in the mid-morning glow. Hope isn't a thing. It's each of us holding a crayon. The room exhaled softly, and then offered applause, not polite, but swelling with resonance. Sheriff Walker stepped forward to speak next. Anna's bravery laid the foundation. But this exhibition, these policies, these partnerships, this is what happens when a community chooses light over silence. He gestured toward the drawings. These aren't just pictures. They're bridges connecting trauma to healing, isolation to belonging. A dozen local teachers, therapists, and officials stepped up to Walker's side, each holding copies of a new initiative, the Greenfield Children's Voice Program, a framework integrating art-based communication, mandatory welfare oversight, and ongoing training for educators and law enforcement. They unveiled a hand-painted poster of a house glowing on a hillside, titled, "Every Home a Haven." A cheer erupted. After the ceremony, Walker walked through the gallery quietly. Children hovered around their own creations. Parents and visitors exchanged stories of hope, of small awakenings, of promises made for a safer future. He found Darlene Mott standing by Anna's mural, tears gently wetting her eyes. "Thank you," Darlene whispered, "for letting me be part of this." Walker nudged her gently. "You listened. That was the beginning." Mary Jo joined them. "Look at them," she said, gesturing to a group of children straddled in giggles, coloring together. Walker nodded, voice soft. "This is the world Anna imagined. Now we just have to keep building it." They stood in the warmth of community, no longer silent, no longer defensive, but awake and shared. That evening, Walker returned home to the quiet house. He paused next to the framed mural of open homes and rainbow hands. Anna's words fluttered back. "Hope isn't a thing. It's each of us holding a crayon." He let them linger, powerful in their simplicity. He found his journal and wrote 2 sentences. "Every story we let be heard can redraw the world. And once we begin to listen, we become part of the healing." Before bed, he placed his hand on Anna's drawing desk, now empty a space for tomorrow's visions. He felt certain of one thing. The story that began with a frightened child in a cage would never end with fear. It would continue as long as there were hands willing to hold crayons, as long as communities chose to repaint brokenness with connection. The horizon glowed, painted in hope. The story of Anna teaches us that even the smallest voice, when heard with compassion, can spark a movement of healing and justice. It reminds us that silence can be as harmful as violence, and that true change begins when we listen deeply, act bravely, and build together. Through art, empathy, and collective responsibility, a wounded community can transform its pain into purpose. Most importantly, Anna's journey shows that every child deserves not just safety, but the power to tell their own story.